Hi everyone, it's Lauren and today I have my March reading wrap up for you. March was the month that I was doing all my travelling in, so I have a lot of books to get through. Let's try and power through them, shall we? So the first book that I read in March was Everything is Illuminated by Jonathan Safran Foer. This was such an interesting book. It's written in such a different way. It's really hard for me to explain. Basically, the author puts himself into this book, and the author, who is Jewish, is travelling back to the Ukraine to find out the people who helped his grandfather escape from the Nazis during World War II. But you get the narrative in three ways. You have his translator in the Ukraine writing him letters in very poorly translated English, which is quite funny, but then also at the first quite hard to read. You have the same translator narrating his own part of the story, which is what happened when the author came over. And you have what the author is writing, which is a stylized, imagined history of his great-great-great-grandparents in the Ukraine. And that portion really reminded me of like 100 Years of Solitude, actually, and you get this magical realism, and it's like the story arc of a family, and also the whole town. And that bit was written very, very beautifully. It was a really interesting idea and a really interesting project, and the writing was really interesting. It's really, really interesting. And obviously equally devastating, as books about what happened to Jewish people during World War II often are. But at the same time, it was actually, the writing style was very playful and very witty, I thought, so it was actually quite funny, as well as being very, very, very upsetting. I mean, it's his first novel, so I don't know how much his writing style is going to evolve, like when I pick up Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. But yeah, it was good, interesting, very differently written book, and it was good. I enjoyed it. The next book I picked up in March was Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, who is, I believe, the former COO of Facebook. It's basically about her career in business and what she's noticed as a woman, what she notices in other women, and the differences that maybe women have to face in business, and giving advice and tips and just what she's learned. It's not really a proper self-help book, it's more just like anecdotes of her life. The aim of it is to highlight, I suppose, if you're a woman and you're in business, making you notice things that you might do differently, or the way you might be treated a little bit differently. But you might not have realised that. So once you recognise the situation you're in, you can respond to it and understand and change the dynamic yourself. I've done a separate review of this book because I had lots and lots of thoughts of it, so I will link that down below if you're interested. I was on a business trip when I read it, so I just thought it would be appropriate for me to learn some insider tips. The next book I read in March was Hold Your Own by Tempest, which is a collection of her poetry. I absolutely hands up copied this from Jean's Bookish Thoughts. She just did a review, which I'll link below because she explains it so well, and it just sounded really interesting, so I thought I'd pick it up. I'm not a reader of poetry at all, a complete novice, so I thought this would be quite a good way in. Tempest uses the Greek myth of Tiresias to structure her poem. They're kind of part autobiographical, part comment on society, and she just groups them depending on the stage in Tiresias's life from this myth. I'm not sure how I felt about it. Some poems I really, really liked, some I felt were a little bit jingly, but then it's a problem with me reading poetry because I don't know if the structure is, you know, if I don't like the structure, it can be like, oh well, but maybe it was that structure for a reason. So I think I really want to reread it. I did enjoy it. And I maybe want to read like some of her other stuff, like Brand New Ancients, and kind of get into it. But it was good. It was a good first dip into poetry for me, and you know, I thought it was fine considering I don't read poetry very often. I did think it was quite accessible, so yeah, it was good. Go and watch Jean's video and she will sell it to you much better than I can. The next book I read was on my Kindle, and it was The Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett. I've not read any of Terry Pratchett's work before, and I just wanted to give it a go and see if I liked it. I'm not really sure if it was for me. It's almost like a send-up of typical fantasy novels, and it's this little wizard and his friend, and they're going on these crazy adventures, and Pratchett's imagination is incredible. It's like he had so much in his brain that he wanted to get on the page that almost stuff, the way it's written, it's almost like stuff has already happened before you've really worked out what, like before he's explained it. A lot of the time I was reading it going, what? Where are they now? Like, what's happened now? How are they in a tree? Or like, I just don't know, sometimes something would happen, it wouldn't be explained until like a few pages later. It was good, it was very funny. I think I will continue trying to read the Discworld novels. I don't know if I want to read all, you know, 187, however many they are, but I'd probably try The Light Fantastic as well. Just see how it goes. I mean, I was pleased to read it. It was good. I just don't think it's I think it's my kind of book, really, but you know, it was good, it was fine. So then after that I read The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Richard Flanagan. This won the Man Booker Prize last year, and with good reason. It was incredible. This is the story of an Australian man who was a Japanese prisoner of war during World War II. It's his life before, his life after, and his life during. It kind of jumps around his timeline. I hate trying to talk about World War II novels without sounding completely trite and silly, but I did feel like this was an important book. Mostly because in my education of World War II it was so Western European centric, but we didn't really learn about Japan and what happened around there. And it was a world war, and it was so many countries were involved, in the Middle East as well, and we didn't really learn about that. So for me this was really enlightening. Equally I felt like it was important to show the level of suffering that a human being can withstand, and equally the level of suffering a human being is able to inflict on others. The word that best describes my feeling on ending this book was that it was devastating. Despite that, it is beautifully written. The descriptions of the environment and the kind of view the author takes of all these different characters' motivations is very, very interesting. A word of caution: if you're a kind of person who does not like reading about very violent acts, if you do not like descriptions of disgusting diseases, this is a very hard book to read. There are some really, really tough things that happen in this book, and if you don't like that kind of thing, which is absolutely fine, if you don't want to read about these awful things happening to people, then don't read it. At the same time, I do feel like it's important for us to try, because these sorts of things happen to people, and it's important for us to remember. Having read a couple of the other shortlisted books as well, I can completely see why this won. It was an amazing read. I would really recommend giving it a go, but just have that pre-warning that it is quite a difficult read. But I thought it was fantastic. At the same time I was reading that, I was also reading Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. I was reading her essays kind of in between chapters of that, and yeah, like, this has been doing the rounds on BookTube. A lot of people have been hauling it and talking about it a few months ago. I thought it was fine. Like, I do read quite a lot of feminist literature, and it wasn't mind-blowing for me. It wasn't completely stuff that I'd never heard before. Especially if you saw my wrap-up last month after reading A Room of One's Own and We Shall Be Feminists, I did feel like this wasn't written as well. I think one of the main problems is a lot of her essays centre on other books or TV shows or films, and she talks about representations and things that happen within those. But by doing that, she ends up just explaining the plot of these things to you, and I just think, like, with some things that are very well known, like Girls on HBO, like, I know what she's talking about when she talks about Girls, but if she explains some random book that I haven't read, I almost feel like she's just giving the plot away. I think it was just a bit of an odd choice. Having said that, there were several essays which I thought were fantastic. I thought her essay on privilege was very good. There's a couple that I've tabbed because I thought they were so good, but a book as a whole I thought was a little bit confused. But if you're very, very new to feminism, or you don't really know what it's about and why you should care about it, it's probably quite a good place to start because it has so many pop culture references. It's worth a read, but you know, I didn't love it. It was just fine. And then because I was away for such a long time, I was like, right, this is my opportunity to read The Luminaries by Eleanor, Catton, which I got on my Kindle because it's so long and so big. So I was like, right, I'm gonna read it. Here's the thing, when it comes to Man Booker winners, sometimes I just feel like they're rewarding ambition rather than whether that ambition paid off, or whether it's a good book to read. I feel like The Narrow Road to Deep North was a really, really good book to read, but I felt the same with Midnight's Children. I felt like, oh, that's a really good story, it's a really good idea, but I didn't like it. Like, I'm not enjoying reading it. It's not very easy to read. It's really difficult. Like, it's not fun. Like, you have to work at reading. And my personal opinion is that that's not big or clever, making your book really hard for the sake of it being really hard. The Luminaries is incredibly ambitious. She achieves her ambition. It's amazing. Like, I can't believe that everything that happened in this book came out of one person's head. But, you know, it's quite hard. It's a very long book. It centres around the gold rush in New Zealand, and from the start we have a man who's walked into a pub. He's walked in on 12 men discussing an incident that's happened, and they're all somehow on the peripheries of this incident. They're all involved and they don't know what happened, and they're trying to work it out. And what the incident was is a man has been found dead, a prostitute has apparently tried to kill herself and they're not sure why, another man is completely missing, and a pot of gold has just appeared in this man's house. So it's lots and lots of stuff going on. They're trying to work out who's involved and what's happened. But, you know, the first half of the book is them explaining to this man what happened 2 weeks ago for 400 pages. And that's a long first half. Each section of the book gets shorter, so the first section is the whole first half, the next section is the shorter versions, and then the last section is just one chapter. So once you get over the hurdle of the first half, it's actually very, very quick, and it gets much more fast-paced. And I did genuinely want to know what happened, and trying to work out the mystery was really interesting, and I did want to find it out. And she doesn't write badly, she writes really well, and she writes, it's not like it's a slow read, it's just a lot of it. And it's hard for me to say to you, once you get over the halfway point, it's fine, because the halfway point is like the length of maybe 2 books. So if you don't mind a long book, if you can get through it, I really enjoyed it. It's so impressive. It's such an impressive book. That doesn't necessarily mean it's my favourite book ever. And then the last book I read was free on my Kindle, so I was like, mate, download it, why not? And it is The Sky Is Everywhere by Jandy Nelson. After the Luminaries, I was like, something quick, something easy. And it was good, it was fine. It's a young adult book. It's about a girl called Lenny whose sister has died. The way the book deals with grief and heartache is very, very beautiful, and I thought that a lot of the things that was happening were quite funny. Like the guy that she has a kind of a romantic interest in the book, I did find that a bit wet. I mean, there's one scene where he's like, I was just in my field playing a guitar and I saw you walk past and write a poem and throw it into the air. And I was like, well, that happens to me all the time. The most beautiful man in the whole world is just sitting in a field playing his guitar while I write poetry. Like, oh my god. Silly romance aside, I thought her writing was quite funny. I thought the way she dealt, I mean, the grief was just heartbreaking. I mean, it was very, very sad. A lot of the metaphors that she used I thought were quite nice. It was just a lovely read, and I do hear that I'll Give You the Sun is very, very good. I feel like on the grapevine this maybe isn't as good as that one, so I still want to try reading that one. But yeah, it was fun. It was a much easier read after reading the Luminaries, I'll give it that. So that's everything that I read in March. I know this is a little bit late, but what can you do? Let me know what you read in March, let me know if you've read any of these books, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!